A 48-year-old black CEO walked into her own luxury hotel and was told, "We're full. Guests only." She didn't argue. She made one phone call, and everything changed. She wasn't looking for anything fancy. No welcome party, no red carpet. Just a key, a warm bed, and one quiet night to reset before a board meeting she hadn't planned to attend in person. But when Vanessa Claiborne stepped through the revolving glass doors of the Oakmark Grand Hotel in Des Moines, Iowa, nothing went as expected. She moved with a kind of quiet confidence that didn't need attention. Her soft loafers made no sound. Her tailored slacks were modest, her dusty blue silk blouse plain but elegant. A canvas duffel hung from her shoulder. No assistant, no entourage. She looked like any other guest, or maybe someone trying to be one. Behind the front desk, a young receptionist chewed on her pen, acrylic nails tapping the keyboard. She looked up with the kind of polite smile you give someone you're about to turn away. "Checking in?" she asked. "Yes," Vanessa replied, still polite. "Under Claiborne." "Vanessa," the girl typed, then frowned. I don't see any reservation under that name." "That's all right," Vanessa said evenly. "There's a suite always held open for me." "Ma'am, we're at full capacity tonight," the girl replied, her tone shifting. "You need a confirmed booking to stay here. Guests only." Vanessa's smile didn't fade, but the room felt heavier. She looked past the girl at the gold plaque behind her. Oakmark Grand, a Claiborne property. Her name wasn't just on a reservation. It was on the building. "I am a guest," she said quietly. "And more than that, I own this hotel." The receptionist blinked, startled, then gave a disbelieving smirk. "You own the Oakmark?" Vanessa nodded. "Calm. I'm going to have to call the manager," the girl muttered, reaching for the phone. Across the lobby, conversation slowed. A man by the fireplace turned his head. A couple near the elevators paused mid-sentence. Vanessa felt the weight, the same familiar look. Someone must be lying, and we think we know who it is. Moments later, a thin man in a crooked tie emerged from a side door. His badge read Assistant Manager, Neil Dorrance. "Good evening," he said too cheerfully. "Is there a problem with your reservation?" "She claims to own the hotel," the receptionist blurted. Neil hesitated. Vanessa kept her voice calm. "I don't claim. I do. My name is Vanessa Claiborne. You'll find it on every quarterly report and every executive memo. I'm here for one night. There should be a suite under the owner block." Neil adjusted his glasses, nervous. "Right. Just give me one moment, please." He turned and disappeared toward the back, whispering into his walkie. Vanessa didn't move, didn't fidget, didn't raise her voice. But the air grew thick. Then security appeared, not aggressive, just watchful. One stood near the elevators, another by the coffee bar. A silent message, "Stay where you are." She felt it, the quiet fire in her chest. Not because they didn't recognize her, but because they thought she didn't belong. Again, she could have pulled out her ID, showed them ownership papers, photos from the ribbon cutting 6 years ago. But instead, she stepped aside, took out her phone, and made one call. Just one. She didn't rant, didn't record, didn't explain. Her voice was calm. "I've been denied access to my own property. I need this resolved immediately." 26 seconds. That's all it took. At the desk, the receptionist kept typing, pretending the computer might change its mind. Neil returned, a folder in hand, trying for a softer tone. "Miss Claiborne," he said, emphasizing her name now. "I think there's been a mix-up. We just need to verify." "You can verify all you want," Vanessa interrupted gently. "I'm not moving." He looked to security. They stayed put. The staff froze, caught between fear and protocol. From the corner of her eye, Vanessa saw the stairs. 3 women whispering by the window. A young man pretending not to listen. The doorman, silent now, stopped greeting guests. And then she noticed the receptionist, hiding her phone beneath the counter, typing her name into Google, probably expecting nothing. It would have been funny if it weren't so familiar, because it always played out the same way. People thought they knew what power looked like, what ownership dressed like, what leadership sounded like. And she never fit their picture. Brown skin, textured hair pulled into a neat puff. No designer bag, no diamonds, just quiet confidence. And that was never enough for them. She remembered another hotel lobby, years ago in Milwaukee. 28 years old, brand new VP, wearing heels that blistered her feet and a suit 2 sizes too big. Security had followed her then too, until the CFO came down to meet her in person. She never forgot that. Now, 2 decades later, it was happening again. Only this time, she owned the building. The elevator chimed. Two men stepped out, one in a gray suit, the other in a company fleece. Neither looked like hotel staff. And that's when the night truly began to change. They moved with purpose. Vanessa recognized them instantly, Regional Vice President Brent Kessler and District Manager Carlos Reno. Now it was their faces that showed a flicker of panic. Brent approached quickly, nodding at Neil without slowing. Miss Claiborne, we are so sorry. I just got the call. Carlos followed close behind, breathless. We're taking care of this right now. Neil started to speak, but Brent silenced him with a glance. The receptionist froze, eyes wide, complexion pale, as realization set in. She finally understood who Vanessa was. Suite 1202 has been cleared, Carlos said, scrolling through his tablet. Your driver's being rerouted for tomorrow morning. And your usual fruit tray and espresso order will be ready when you wake. Vanessa offered the smallest smile. Thank you. But she wasn't done watching. She wanted to see how they all reacted now that they knew who she was. Would their tone soften? Would their posture change? She wanted to witness how power behaved once it entered the room. Because it's one thing to be disrespected when people don't know your name. It's something else entirely when they do, and choose to anyway. Carlos pulled Neil aside, his voice low but sharp. Brent was already on the phone, speaking in clipped, urgent tones about HR protocols and service misconduct. The tension that had once been aimed at Vanessa now ricocheted through the staff like a pinball of panic. Vanessa didn't gloat. She didn't cross her arms or tilt her chin in triumph. She simply walked back to the front desk, slow, steady steps, and placed her phone on the counter. I'll take the 12th floor suite, she said evenly. Same setup. Please send someone to confirm it's clean. The receptionist opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Vanessa didn't wait. She turned to Brent. Have I been checked in? Just finished, he replied, flipping through his clipboard. You'll have 2 key cards and an incident report by the time you're in the elevator. Good, Vanessa said quietly. And the rest? Brent nodded. We've issued a site-wide notice. Corporate audit is on standby. All staff will undergo recertification on guest protocol. Disciplinary actions start tonight. Vanessa's gaze shifted back to the receptionist, Kayla, her badge now trembling slightly on her chest. The girl's acrylic nails tapped nervously against the counter, the rhythm no longer confident, just anxious. You'll speak to her, Vanessa said simply. Brent cleared his throat. Yes, ma'am. Privately, with HR present. Carlos looked ready to interject, but Vanessa raised one hand. I'll speak to her too. Not now, after I've rested. She took the key cards, nodded once, and walked toward the elevator. Heads turned as she passed. Some guests whispered, others just stared. No one said a word. When the elevator doors closed, she caught one last glimpse of Neil, stiff and sweating by the desk. On the 12th floor, her suite smelled faintly of lemon and eucalyptus. The fruit tray waited, the espresso pod stacked neatly beside the machine. A handwritten card with her initials lay on the table, clearly rushed. She moved through the room slowly, inspecting, not for dust or fingerprints, but for attitude, for care, for proof that someone still remembered what this place stood for. Because this hotel wasn't just a business. It was her story. She thought back to when she was 33, pitching to a bank in Minnesota that didn't believe she could pull it off. They barely listened, offered brutal terms, and practically dared her to succeed. And she did. Now, almost 2 decades later, standing in the penthouse suite she designed herself, she was still proving she belonged. Her phone buzzed, a message from her assistant. Everything in motion. Let me know if you want a media statement. Vanessa paused. One tweet, and it would go viral. One interview, and headlines would write themselves. But this wasn't about rage. It wasn't about revenge. It was about respect, and how too often, it was tied to assumptions, not truth. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded. Outside, Des Moines moved quietly, traffic murmuring along Grand Avenue, a train horn echoing in the distance. Inside, the suite was still. Then came a knock. Room service. A young man entered with a fresh espresso, a note of apology from the kitchen manager, and an offer for a complimentary massage. Vanessa thanked him softly and closed the door behind him. She sat back down, sipped the espresso, and stared at the window. The city lights shimmered faintly, reflections dancing across the glass. Something was changing, not just in the hotel, but in her. At exactly 6:30 the next morning, Vanessa Claiborne descended in the elevator, this time not as a guest, but as the CEO. Her suit was crisp charcoal, her ivory blouse spotless, heels clicking with every step. The lobby, half awake with early checkouts and coffee runs, went still when she appeared. Even the barista paused mid-pour. Brent and Carlos were waiting near the fireplace, dark circles under their eyes. They looked like men who hadn't slept. Vanessa gave them a curt nod and walked straight to the executive conference room behind the concierge desk. Inside sat Neil, the receptionist, Kayla Mendez, and a corporate HR rep named Marta. Marta's notepad was already open. Vanessa didn't sit. She stood at the head of the table, arms folded. Silence filled the room. Finally, she spoke. Would someone like to explain what happened last night, from your perspective? Kayla dropped her gaze instantly. Neil opened his mouth, then shut it again. Vanessa waited. At last, Kayla whispered, I just didn't think she was. I didn't expect. You didn't expect someone like me to own the building. Vanessa finished for her. Calm, controlled. Kayla nodded, barely. Was I rude to you? Vanessa asked. Kayla shook her head. Did I raise my voice? Did I threaten anyone? Kayla's voice was barely a whisper. No, ma'am. Vanessa took a slow breath and turned slightly toward Marta. I don't need this to be a firing squad, she said. But I do need accountability. Marta nodded, understanding. Carlos spoke up. We're prepared to issue a formal write-up, remove her from front desk rotation until recertification is complete. Neil will be placed on administrative review pending further interviews. Vanessa nodded once, then finally sat down. She turned to Kayla again. How long have you worked here? For months, Kayla answered. And in that time, how often have you thought about who built this hotel? Where it came from? Kayla hesitated. I guess I just assumed it was some corporation. A group of investors or something. Vanessa let the moment hang. Do you know how many properties I've built across this country? Kayla shook her head. 17, Vanessa said softly. From Baltimore to Phoenix. Every one designed with intention. Luxury made accessible. Service made human. I built this brand because I was tired of being treated like a shadow. So tell me, why, when I walk into my own lobby, am I still invisible to the people working under my name? The question wasn't angry. It was tired, honest, heavy. Kayla looked like she wanted to melt into her chair. Neil stared straight ahead, face red. Carlos spoke again. We've already drafted a memo that will go out to every Claiborne property today. Mandatory staff-wide inclusivity training. A reset. No exceptions. Vanessa fixed him with her gaze. Make sure it's not just another box to check. I don't want people memorizing scripts. I want them understanding what respect looks like when they think no one's watching. Brent finally spoke. We'll make it real. Vanessa stood. The meeting was over. As she walked out, the lobby seemed to straighten itself. Staff scrambled, some nodding nervously, but she didn't acknowledge them. Not yet. She wasn't looking for performance. She was looking for change. Before leaving the hotel, there was still one more conversation she needed to have. And it had nothing to do with policy. She waited until the morning rush had thinned. She gave it time, not for drama, but so no one could hide behind distraction. No ringing phones. No fake smiles for incoming guests. Just stillness and truth. She spotted Kayla in the staff lounge, behind the coffee bar, seated alone at a narrow table with a half-eaten blueberry muffin. Her phone was face down. She looked like she hadn't slept either. Vanessa didn't send someone to call her. She walked in herself. Kayla sat up fast, nearly knocking over her drink. Relax, Vanessa said, pulling out the chair across from her. I just want to talk. Kayla swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. Drop the ma'am, Vanessa replied gently. This isn't a hearing. Kayla nodded, eyes down. They sat in silence, the hum of the fridge and low buzz of overhead lights filling the space. Vanessa spoke first. Have you ever worked somewhere you felt small? Kayla blinked, looked up. Yeah, most of the time. Tell me, Vanessa pressed. Kayla hesitated, then shrugged. I worked at a diner off I-80 for a year. Paper hat, yelled at by cooks every shift. Some customers never tipped. Some called me kid, even though I was 27. I felt invisible most days. Vanessa leaned back. So you know what it feels like to be ignored? Kayla nodded. Then help me understand, Vanessa said, voice even. How you looked me in the eye last night and decided I didn't belong here. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of guilt. Realization. Something finally settling into place. Kayla's voice was rough. I don't know. I didn't mean to. When you walked in, I thought you were maybe lost or waiting on someone else. You didn't look like. Like what? Vanessa asked, calm. Kayla shook her head. Like the kind of person who owns hotels. Vanessa didn't flinch. And what does that kind of person look like? Kayla didn't answer. That's the real problem, Vanessa said. People have a picture in their head. Clean cut. Probably male. Probably older. Definitely not me. That picture doesn't just live in your head. It affects decisions. It shapes behavior. I'm sorry, Kayla whispered. Really, Vanessa said. I know that's not enough. But it's a start. I'm not here for an apology. I came here because I wanted you to see me, not just as your boss, not as a cautionary tale, but as a person. Kayla looked confused. I was you once, Vanessa continued. I started as a receptionist. Got mistaken for a janitor more times than I can count. People called me sweetheart and honey, like I wasn't the one keeping the place running. Every time, I had to decide whether to fight or let it go. When I finally got into the boardroom, I told myself I'd build places where people like you could grow. Kayla's eyes widened. You really started as a receptionist? Vanessa smiled. In St. Paul, my first boss said I talked too educated to be on phones and moved me to night audit. That was the beginning. Kayla almost laughed. That's unreal. It shouldn't be, Vanessa said. It should be normal. She stood. I don't need you to be perfect, but I do need you to be aware. Every guest who walks through that door, old, young, dressed up or not, deserves dignity. Start there, and you'll never have to recover from moments like last night again. Kayla stood. Thank you for talking to me. I mean that. Vanessa nodded once and left her standing there. But as she walked back through the lounge door, something in her felt lighter. The message had finally landed where it needed to. By mid-morning, the rhythm of the Oakmark Grand had returned, at least on the surface. Guests wheeled bags across polished tiles. Coffee cups clinked gently at the bar. A family asked about nearby zoos. Life moved on, like it always does. But inside the management office, it was different. Brent stood by the window, watching the valet rotate cars. Carlos typed quietly at his laptop, drafting the official internal memo. Marta, the HR lead, reviewed new onboarding modules with a stony focus. And in the center of it all, Vanessa's presence had already shifted the culture. Vanessa read through a fresh stack of evaluations, personnel files flagged for review. She wasn't angry. She was exact. I'm not here to punish, she said aloud, scanning one report. I'm here to prevent repetition. Carlos looked up. We're adjusting our interview process for front desk hires. Not just for skill, but for empathy. Pattern testing. Bias evaluation. Good. Vanessa replied, tapping her pen once on the desk. And put me on the rotation starting next quarter. I'll show up at random properties, quietly, like I did here. Brent raised an eyebrow. You want to be what? A secret guest. Not secret, she said. Just anonymous. Until I'm not. Carlos grinned slightly. That's going to make a lot of people nervous. Good, she said. Let them sit in it. The real version of this job doesn't come with warnings. She stood, slipping the papers into a folder. Have the new training go live by next Friday. Include story modules. I want staff reading actual experiences from guests, not fake scripts. Real words. Human ones. Brent nodded. Consider it done. Vanessa left the office, walking back into the lobby. She stopped near the reception desk where a new agent had taken over. He smiled immediately, respectful, like he understood she wasn't just another suit walking by. She returned the nod, then looked around. Everything seemed still on the outside, but she could feel it, small cracks forming in old habits. That's how real change begins. Not with a press release, not with a public apology, but with quiet corrections, repeated until they stick. She made her way to the elevator, headed upstairs to grab her things. Her flight wasn't until late afternoon. There was time. When the doors opened on the 12th floor, she stepped out, heels soft against the carpet. The hallway smelled faintly of fresh linens and lemon. The suite door stood ajar. Housekeeping must have just finished. Inside, her bag was packed neatly, zipped. Laptop on the desk, charger wrapped. Everything was in order, except one thing. A note, folded, sitting on the nightstand. She opened it. Miss Claiborne, thank you for your grace. I'll be better. Kayla. It wasn't fancy. No envelope. Just lined notepad paper, careful handwriting. but it meant more than a pre-written company apology ever could. Vanessa folded it once and slipped it into her purse. Downstairs, a car was waiting. As she exited through the lobby, the same doorman from the night before opened the door with purpose. "Safe travels, Miss Claiborne," he said warmly. "We hope to see you again soon." She smiled. "You will." As the car pulled away, she didn't look back. She didn't need to. She had left something heavier than luggage behind. The weight of being misjudged. The quiet ache of having to prove her worth. And what replaced it was better, understanding, discomfort, growth, for them, and maybe even for herself. But there was still one last thing she wanted to say. Not to the hotel, not to the staff. This message was for anyone who had ever stood in a room and had to prove they belonged. The ride to the airport was quiet. No small talk, no music. Just the soft whir of tires and the occasional blink of a turn signal. Vanessa sat in the back seat, one hand resting on her purse, the other holding the folded note from Kayla. She hadn't read it again, but it was there, like a small piece of proof that the previous night hadn't been for nothing. She stared out the window at rows of brick buildings, corner gas stations, faded signs for mechanics and bakeries. This wasn't where she'd planned to be this week. Yet maybe she had been meant to be here all along. Not for the board meeting, not for the business, but for the conversation. Because the truth is, this kind of thing didn't shock her anymore. She wasn't angry. She was tired. Tired of how often worth gets measured by assumptions. Tired of how fast people sort you into categories without asking a single question. Tired of being made to explain things she should never have to say aloud. Yes, this is mine. Yes, I built it. Yes, I deserve to be here. And yet she wasn't bitter. That's the part people don't understand. Vanessa didn't carry bitterness. She carried memory. And memory could be powerful if you used it right. As airport signs came into view, she thought about her younger self. That girl working night shifts in cheap flats and stiff uniforms. No makeup, no recognition. Just drive, just belief. That someday she'd build something no one could take from her. She had done that. But buildings weren't enough. Even with 17 properties and a team of executives reporting to her, people still looked at her and saw something else. Something less. So what do you do when the world refuses to see you? You make sure you see yourself clearly, without apology. Then you walk in anyway. You hold your ground. You speak plainly. You don't beg for permission. You act like the door was always yours. Vanessa stepped out of the car, grabbed her bag, and nodded at the driver. No more words were needed. Inside the terminal, people hurried around her with coffee cups and roller bags. Announcements echoed overhead. She moved quietly, almost invisible again in the rush of strangers. But in her chest, something had settled. She had taken a moment of humiliation and turned it into a mirror for everyone in that hotel to finally see themselves. Mirrors don't lie. They show you who you really are. She hoped Kayla would grow from it. She hoped Neil would learn. She hoped Carlos and Brent would follow through on every promise made in that office. But if they didn't, she would still be standing. She always had been. Because dignity wasn't something anyone gave her. It was something she never gave up. And for anyone watching, anyone listening, who had ever been dismissed, doubted, or spoken to like they didn't matter, Vanessa had one final thing to say. You don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to know who you are and walk like it every single time. Let them be uncomfortable. Let them learn. Let them wonder how they missed it. And when they finally see you, make sure they never forget.